I'm very happy to welcome you to the next set of installment of International Tree Mortality Network seminars. We had a bit of a break, but now we are going again. And today I'm very happy to welcome Ruiling Lu, who's joining us from Shanghai, and she's going to be talking to us about her work on tree mortality in Australian forests, recently published in Nature Plants. So very excited to hear more about this. We will run the session as always, that Ling will give a presentation, maybe about 25, 30 minutes. And then afterwards, we'll have a question and answer session. If you have, any questions that occur to you during the talk, please just enter them in the Q&A button, which you'll find at the bottom of the Zoom window. And what we will do is behind the scenes, we will collate those questions and we will pose them to Ruiling at the end in the discussion. So, Ruiling, if you'd like to share your screen, and the floor is all yours.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Ruiling from East China Normal University. Today I'm going to talk about the tree mortality across the Australian ecosystem and what they can tell us about the future of global forest. So in a forest, the death of an individual tree seems like a stochastic event, but when we scale up at the ecosystem level, tree mortality plays a key role in regulating the global carbon cycle. So the forest stores carbon not only by taking up carbon through the tree growth, but of course by keeping the carbon in the living biomass. When a tree dies, this carbon moves into the litter and soil pores, where the decomposition is gradually released it back to the atmosphere. So the higher mortality means the carbon is cycling faster through the system, which could weaken the long-term carbon storage potential. And because the forests are slow system, sometimes this demographic change can build for decades. And before we can see obvious change in the canopy structure, recent global study shows that globally, the overall forest carbon sink remains stable over the past 3 decades, but its internal dynamic are already shifting. As this blue lines shows, in many temperate and tropical mature forests, this sink strength is weakening, and while the younger regrowing forests can partially offset for that loss, they cannot replicate the carbon density and longevity of mature system. So the real concern is not simply whether the forest is still taking up carbon, but the demographic process that underpins that the long-term storage are becoming more fragile over time. So we can clearly see these patterns in the world's two largest tropical biomass sink. When decomposing the biomass dynamic into the different components, we can see the gross biomass is into system is generally increasing or remains stable, but the net biomass sink has either reduced or began to level off because the carbon loss from tree mortality has increased. And in at least one system, the situation could even be worse. A recent work from Carlo and her colleagues showed that the climate-induced increase in mortality, which sustained over years, has reduced the carbon gain from tree growth so much, pushing the woody biomass from a net carbon sink to a carbon source. So this work is important because it tells us that mortality is no longer a background turnover process. It's becoming a early warning signal of increasing forest vulnerability under climate change. And actually, the multiple independent forest monitoring network directly tracks the rate of tree dying across hundreds of thousands of plots, and it's point to an upward trending in the tree mortality over time across most forested continents. However, the black line are our observations, and the red one are the predictions. So this global picture, this increasing trend is worrying, but it's also seriously incomplete. Many of these studies may confine on the specific forest type, and the reported drivers differed across between the studies. So it's still unclear for us how general these trends are and what is driving them, which make it hard for us to predict where these trends are in the future. And we argue that Australia might be an important test case for understanding the generality of these trends. The first, because it hosts a highly diverse ecosystem. For example, we can see at the wetter coast area from north to south, we have the tropical rainforest, the warm temperate forest, the wet scalefolia forest dominated by the tallest eucalypts. And further inland, we have this mosaic of the tropical savannas, the cypress pine forest, and the dry eucalypt woodlands. And according to the Bureau of Meteorology, this ecosystem are developed under the climate under the one of the most variable climate on Earth. So the interannual rainfall variability is high to extreme high, which means the ecosystem is regularly exposed to the extreme dry and wet conditions, along with the frequent disturbance such as the cyclones and wildfires. So as a result, we think these local species have developed the specialized traits, help them cope with this climate stress. For example, so many eucalypt trees have these narrow, waxy top leaves that could help them to reduce water loss and tolerant these nutrient-poor soils. And they also showed strong responding capacity after the disturbance through the epicormic responding or the lignin tube structure. And they also has a very deep rooting system and those highly drought tolerant hydraulic traits. So in many ways, we believe these Australian species are well adapted to the disturbance and the climate extremes. But this already variable climate is becoming more extreme over time. So Cicero people shows that in this continent, the number of extreme hot days is becoming more frequent, and the number of dangerous weather days become more common, and the drought is also intensified in many parts of the continent. So we still do not know whether this resilience holds under the ongoing climate change. And we think what is happening in the Australia can provide some preview of what forest else will face under the future climate change. So this brings to our central scientific question: is the background tree mortality increase across Australian forests? And if so, what is the drivers behind this long-term trend? We specifically explored 4 hypotheses. The first one, we need to make sure this is not simply driven by the sampling artifacts. And the second, we have to check whether it's just a recovery dynamic following the past disturbance. And the third, we tested the long-term climate stress. And we also look at whether this increased mortality is linked to the faster growth. So to answer these questions, we compiled a large data set of the forest census data across the whole continent. And these plots came from 9 major institutional resources. I would like to acknowledge all the data custodian involved. And in total, we got around 2,700 plots running from the 1941 to the 2023, and with repeated measurement of around 200,000 trees representing around 958 species. And then we group these plots into 4 different biomes. North of the 20 degrees south, we have the tropical savanna in the central northern territory and tropical rainforest in the northeast Queensland, and the plot between the 20 to 35.5 degrees south, where the warm temperate forest, and those far south, where the cool temperate forest. So to ensure the data quality, we only include trees with a diameter at least 5 centimeters and require trees to be measured in at least 2 census separated at least 1 year and was not harvested during the census. And we only retained reports had a minimum area of 0.04 hectare. We excluded census affected by bushfire or experiencing the stand replacing disturbance. And we kept only census that with at least 10 trees. And for the drivers of tree mortality at the plot level, we use the stand basal area as a proxy for competition. We included the long-term moisture index to represent the local mean climate conditions across different plots. For the candidate driver of long-term mortality rates, we calculated the census average climate variables, including the maximum temperature, vapor pressure deficit, and the SPEI as an index of drought stress. We also flagged the occurrence of the tropical cyclones in the tropical rainforest. At the species level, we use 3 common traits from the Austrian database. We have the specific leaf area to indicate the species growth strategies, wood density for the structure strength, and the maximum tree height for the tree statures. At the individual, we also detect the trend in the tree growth rate as a potential explanation for the mortality trend. So before turning into the main result, I want to be transparent about two method challenges in our data set. First one is the sampling intensity. The sampling intensity has shifted over time. We can see the number of plots declined since the 2000, and the geographic distribution of the plot also shift over time. So this means we cannot just simply aggregate the raw mortality pattern and interpret it as a trend without accounting for where and when these plots were sampled. And the second thing is we know that some plots are in the active of recovery dynamic due to the past disturbance. So the apparent long-term increase in mortality could be driven by the self-thinning and has nothing to do with the climate change. So to isolate these effects from a genuine long-term increase trend, we built a statistical model to control for the change in the stand structure. So here the left panel shows our core models to predict the trend. We have the year for detecting the long-term trend and have the stand basal area to account for the change in the forest structure over time. And we also included the nested random effects of the plot identity nested within the data sources. So accounting for all of this, we still find a consistent increase in tree mortality in every biomes we detect. And we think this geographically consistent trend can give us confidence that to suggest that there is a long-term, a widespread increase in tree mortality across the Australian continent. And this pattern is not simply driven by the successional dynamic. And we also find this long-term mortality increase is not uniform across the landscape. The interaction term with the year shows that the rate of mortality increase depends on the local local conditions. So the mortality accelerated fattest in the plots with lower moisture index, and higher competition, where the trees are under the greatest resource stress. And since we have ruled out the recovery pathway, we next want to ask which climate factors can best explain this long-term mortality increase. So we fitted models with all of our climate variables, and we find that the maximum temperature was the most robust predictor of increasing mortality, even though the vapor pressure deficit and the drought stress as shown by the SPI also also increased tree mortality in several biomes, especially in the warm temperate forest. But these effects were less consistent than the temperature. And to explain a trend, we must make sure the driver itself must be trending over time. So we next look at the how these climate drivers change over time, and we find the temperature also increased over time over the studied period, and the drought stress has intensified in most biomes. So this alignment of shows that the led us to conclude the rising temperature is a key driver of the long-term mortality increase. And at the species level, we also curious about whether this long-term mortality increase was specific was concentrated in a particular kind of the species. And so we fitted models with the main trait effects and their interaction with the year. The left panel shows that the traits can predict the average mortality rates very well, but no trait can. The right panel shows no trait can explain the temporal trend in tree mortality. So this tells us that there is no functional trait could buffering the long-term increase in tree mortality. So all the species share the same rate of mortality increase over time. So finally, the final alternative hypothesis about for explaining the rising mortality is whether it is driven by the faster growth due to the faster turnover, and we tested this hypothesis by using the standard basal area increment as to indicate the stand level growth rate? And the answer is no, because the stand level growth rate did not increase over time, and in most biomes, it even showed a declining trend. So we conclude the mortality increase was not a consequence of faster growth rate. So sum it up, our research finds the background mortality has increased consistently across 4 major Australian forest biomes over the past 8 decades. And this increase was linked to the rising mortality rather than to the enhanced growth rate or successional dynamics. And our results are important because it shows that the climate warming has already shifted the demographic towards higher background mortality at a continent scales. And our data set also suggests it's important we need to invest more in maintaining the long-term forest monitoring network, because it's important for us to detecting this trend. So here is my main result. I'm to take. Sorry, I forget. Finally, I would like to acknowledge. And this work is a team effort. I would like to thank everyone that contribute to this project. So thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Many thanks, Ruiling. That's really nice. Very, very exciting that you can see such a strong signal come out, if a little bit sort of depressing for those of us who like our trees to see such strong effects of temperature. So now we'll move into the Q&A. You guys in the audience, if you have any questions based on what you've seen, then please just type them into the Q&A, or if you can't get the Q&A to work, you can type them into the chat and we'll pick those up. But maybe,
Meantime, if you want, I can start with the Q&A that we had in the background.
yeah, go for it, Tamia.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you again, Ruiling. This was a very informative and good talk. So first question, you mentioned that some of the species, especially in Australia, are resprouters.
Yes.
So in these species, it could be difficult to address tree mortality. And how was death defined in such species that can resprout?
This is a very good question, because the census data make sure the average trees, many trees are actually measured multiple times. So if trace is has the can if they show these responding signals, we will finally define it as alive. It's like in the data, it could be shown like a tree first identified as died and then alive. So we will reclassify this individual as alive, the alive. So we will correct the data, but we can only correct the data with multiple sensors to make sure they have the longer time scale to recover. But for some trees that only measured twice, maybe yes, it could be an issue for correcting that. But we correct that this problem.
Thank you. Next question is about the causal relationship between temperature and tree mortality. So how was temperature causing tree mortality? Is it due to increased water loss or stimulation of pests or pathogens? Can you say something about that?
So first, I would say our work is observation. Observational and not experimentally. So it's hard for us to interpret this physical mechanism. We say it's an important underlying drivers, but I think there is a lot of experimental evidence to support our results. If I remember correctly, in the 2009 in PNAS, Adam published a paper. He did a warming and drought experiment. He finds that warming could accelerate the tree death under the drought, and he interpreted the temperature sensitivity in terms of stronger, greater respiratory carbon cost, and with nothing to do with the water balance. But actually, I also did a night warming experiment when I was a undergraduate student. I find that night warming could accelerate the tree growth by increasing both the water stress as well as increasing this thermal stress as well as the water stress by increasing both of them. It's like the temperature could increase this evaporative demand as well as the thermal stress itself could have something to could increase this metabolic cost for trees to survive.
Yeah, right. I can go on, Tom.
That's fine. Or Nadine also, I think, had some.
Yeah, I could also continue a little bit. Thank you again for this really insightful talk. Another question that goes also towards processes and mechanisms is that previous studies have suggested that bigger trees should be more likely to die than smaller ones. So does this trait, is it like based on tree height? Does it account in your ecosystems as well? Have you looked into that? Or is it all like merged together into one? At the different, I mean, you looked also at different ecosystems, and could you find some differences there?
Yes, this is also an important question. So actually, we for the long-term mortality trend, we mainly look at the community level. So we did not look at whether we did not differentiate the size structure, but we did some we did a basic work. Is like we look at the size dependent mortality across the different biomes, so we can find this distinct size dependence of tree mortality. So in the tropical savannas, both small trees and larger trees showed higher mortality rates, but in the tropical rainforests, they are not, so mortality did not depend on the tree size. But in the warm and cool temperate forests, so the mortality reduced with the tree size. But we did not test the interaction between the tree size and the year. So because we have a large data set, the plot has shifted over time. So which means we have the trees with different size at different times. So it's hard for us to distinguish whether it is a real biological trend or it's just the change in mortality across different tree size is driven by the data structure, the change in the plot turnover. So we did not do that in our analysis.
Okay, that makes it very clear. Thank you. Another question that also goes in this direction, I think it's from you, Tom. Did your data set allow you to observe if there was a replacement of dying species by other species with more adapted traits? So could you already see that the forests are really shifting? Or, I mean, it was a very long period. So, I mean, you looked at tree mortality, but could you also see that maybe now other species are coming into the forest?
So we did not directly see whether the species composition are changing, but I think our species level analysis could provide some insight. So we look at whether some the long-term mortality increase are concentrated in particular kinds of the species, and the interaction term was not significant, which means all species are vulnerable to the long-term mortality increase. So I think it could indirectly suggest that it's so the this mortality increase is not driven by the species composition, because all species could share the similar rate of mortality increase.
Thank you very much. We have a bit more technical questions. Maybe Tom, should I hand over to you now from here?
Yeah, I
Would
could
that be
pick that up.
fine?
So, kind of following along from this, so you mentioned that you excluded logging on the plots before you did your analysis. Did you see a lot of logging on the plots? And if so, is this something that could have affected your analysis because maybe these trees would have died anyway? Um, but
Yes, but
instead they logged.
yes, it's an important question. So in some temperate, warm temperate forests, so we could see some logging and most select logging, and so because of but we calculate the mortality rate. If you can see our formulation is based on the tree that already lived. So it's so the mortality rate is based on the tree that should be lived at the last census. So for the tree that will look during the census, we did not account for. We will directly exclude them. They will not influence the mortality rate calculation.
But if they're excluded, then they still can affect what happens on the plot, even if they're excluded from the calculation. That's
Yes,
quite
it
simple.
will. So
Yeah.
what we did is we control for the stand structure, but when we detect the trend, we also include the stand basal area as a covariate. So
Mhm.
after accounting for that, we still detect a long-term increase in tree mortality. And actually we see many logging find in the warm temperate forest. Yes, we control that in our statistical model.
Yeah.
And we find it cannot totally explain the trend.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Wow.
So, and you also excluded the plots that had full mortality, if we got that right.
Yes,
So why did you cut those out?
because we would like to look at the background mortality. The mortality was not driven by the catastrophic disturbance.
Okay. Were there a lot
And
of plots actually that saw full mortality? Was that really common?
it's not common, but it happens, a
Yeah.
few of them.
Okay.
Because we know that the Australia is severely affected by bushfire. So we control that effect by using a national bushfire data set. But sometimes uh, this uh, this this national data set product could miss something, some plots. So these plots experienced the complete mortality might have experienced this acute disturbance.
Okay,
we
cool.
exclude them. And we think this could strongly affect this mortality trend.
Yeah, I'm sure it can have a big influence, but it makes perfect sense why you excluded that here. A bit of a different angle with the next question. So on your slide 15, you see this sort of maximum number of plots is around 2000 and then it starts
Yes.
dropping off. So why do you know why this is happening? Is it simply because as you get closer to the present day, there's some plots that haven't been recensused, but they're going to be recensused? Or is it really a big drop off in the monitoring that's happened in Australia in the last 20 years? Are we monitoring less now than we did many years ago?
So actually, this decline, most of this decline happens in the warm temperate forest. So it's because there are two main reasons. The first one is because funding cuts, which forced many plots being discontinued. So they stop resense the plots. So they a lot of plots will dropped since 2000. And the second reason was the bushfire effects. So in 2009, the Black Summer, Australia has this severe severe wider severe wildfire season. So I exclude a lot of census in 2019 and after 2000. If I remember correctly, I exclude around 400 census during this period.
Okay, but I guess it's clear that there's a need for more long-term monitoring here, isn't there? Or resurrection of long-term monitoring if we're going to be able to continue looking at trends like this going into the future. So
Yes.
that's
Yes, because most of them are not ecological monitoring networks. They came from the forestry agency. So they are aiming at the timber production, not the scientific goals. So they could stop the census.
yes, okay.
Or
So many different causes behind why we monitor our forests. It's very true.
yeah.
I'm just looking at the time. Maybe we have time for one or two more questions. Would anybody else on the chairing team like to pick up and ask anything else before we close?
I would like to comment something. I mean, you excluded a lot of these wildfire impacts in your work, but
Yeah.
still you see this rising tree mortality. So this background tree mortality, that's even more shocking, I would say. I mean, on the one side, we have wildfires that are getting more severe, and there's mortality. And on the other side, you already see this influence here. So that's even double the effect, I would say.
Yes. So this is a real worrying concern about the background mortalities. But yes.
Is there anyone from the attendees? Sorry, Tamia, is there anyone from the attendees? You have last call for questions now. If you have one, please paste them in the Q&A. Tamir, you.
Yeah, also following up maybe on what Nadine asked, if I look at the values on the y-axis of your graphs, Ruiling, the ones from Australia, they seem of different magnitude. If you compare, for example, to the graph from McDowell et al. That you showed in the introduction.
Here?
So here, the mortality rates are in 1 or 2% per year, even more. And
Yes.
it was like 0.01 or 5 maximum, I think.
Yes, so their percentage in the unit of percentage, and we are in the unit of proportion. So which means the mortality rates are in the same magnitude. It's like the baseline mortality rate is around it is around 0.01 per year.
Okay. Okay.
So we need to multiply 100 if to be able to compare with this.
Which
So
makes
we're actually in the same magnitude.
yeah. Good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions coming up. So perhaps this is then a good time to thank you again, Ruiling. Very interesting talk and nice discussion. Very much appreciate that you took the time to come on. So we'll close the seminar here. And of course, we will be back hopefully in a few weeks' time with the next installment of the seminars. So you can watch out on our webpage and our newsletter for the next person coming up on May the 12th, I gather. So thank you very much and have a nice day wherever you are.